get into the good stuff. Hello, welcome everyone, and we know others will be joining us. Happy Saturday. We're so glad to see your smiling faces, and we do hope, certainly respect anybody, if you are videoed out or you are sloppily eating some sort of lunch right now, feel free to stay off video. But if you want to join us on video, we'd love to see you. My name is Megan Thomas. I'm the Vice President of Collaboration and Special Initiatives at San Diego Grantmakers, and so happy to be here with you today for this great session. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I wanted to start by just inviting us all to sort of begin to work our way into what will hopefully be a restful weekend, put ourselves in a mindset to really enjoy one another's company and absorb all the wonderful knowledge that Sharon is going to share and that you will all share with a few breaths. We usually do this a lot, and I actually haven't done it much this week, so I'm ready for it. So maybe find a comfortable position. Recognize wherever in your body you might be holding tension. It's probably there if you're like me. And then we'll just do maybe 3 breaths together, breathing 1 deep breath together in and out. We're mostly on mute, so you can be as noisy as you want. Breathing in and out. Oh. And 1 more. I'm going for the arms. In. Oh, and out. Oh. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Welcome. You are here at Grantmaking 101, Maximizing Nonprofit Research. We are going to record this video, so you will have it available later. We will share it out and hope you'll share it with colleagues who weren't able to join us. And also everything that you share with us will be on that recording, so just feel free to keep that in mind. As with most of these video type deals, we've got a chat box at the bottom, which we really encourage folks to use throughout the session. We want this to be as interactive as possible, and we will do our best to answer your questions in the chat or live. Sharon is a very apt facilitator and has been teaching Grantmaking 101 for a long, long time, so she'll manage that. But I just want to let you know this is part of a series that we introduced this year. You know, Grantmakers has a long history of providing subject matter information, but also skills building and connection. And so we decided we would actually describe that as a series of fundamentals this year that are designed for folks who are new to philanthropy, who need to start building up their awareness, but also as a place to come and reflect and catch up on best practices for those of us who have been around for a while. And I'm glad to say that our attendance today actually comprises all of those folks. So I think it's going to be a really exciting and dynamic conversation. So with that, I want to introduce Debbie Mckeon, who's our president and CEO, to say hello, and then I'll do a very brief introduction for the woman who needs no introduction, and we'll get on our way. Debbie?
Thank you so much, Megan, and welcome everyone this afternoon. I feel more restful even just having started that off, so thanks, Megan, for giving us that time to think about ourselves and putting our minds in the right position. And I don't know if it was in my mind or if you actually said it, but I thought you might have welcomed us on this Saturday, so maybe that's foreshadowing the weekend that we're all anticipating. So I'm enjoying and appreciating that. And I'm particularly excited for this series because, like, as we all know, doing philanthropy well takes real intention. It's a field of practice, and we're excited that Sharon's going to spend time with us. And as I think about this aspect of our field of practice, the research component, I think of how valuable that is to help us be able to take the responsibility to learn about the issues and the effective solutions so that we can really mitigate the need for our grantees and potential grantees to have to bestow all of that upon us. And we can really start our relationship in a different place. So I'm thankful that all of you care deeply about bringing that lens to your work as well too. And I'm excited now to turn it back to Megan to introduce the person who needs no introduction.
Absolutely, thank you. And maybe before we get there, we'll take just what's probably going to be about 2 minutes to make sure we all know who's on the line with us. Let's start with, I'm just going to call out first names, and if you want to unmute yourself and say who you are and you know who you're affiliated with, or literally 3 minutes about what you're hoping to get. 3 minutes, no. 3 words about what you're hoping to get out of this session. That'll give us a sense of who's in the room. There's one person on the phone, so I'm going to call your last 4 digits of your phone number when we get there. But could we start with Chris Bronner?
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Lynn Bronner from Dr. Bronner's Family Foundation. We are kind of new to grant making. We've only been doing this for a couple of years in terms of intentional grant programming. So this is something that is really relevant to our work. Even though I've done a lot of corporate giving for many years, philanthropic tools are just they're different, and it's a way for me to kind of broaden our impact at Dr. Bronner's, but also just comparing notes and learning from other professionals. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Welcome. And let's try and keep those intros a little shorter, although that was very enlightening. Let's pass it to Elka.
Sorry, getting to the mute was a little bit tough. Sure, my name is Elke Patton, and I'm very new to grant making. So just trying to figure out how it's done and what are some of the things to look for.
Great, thank you. And Monica.
Hi, everyone. I'm a member of Funders Together to End Homelessness in San Diego, and looking for how we can kind of groom toward less burdensome compliance for the providers while achieving better, sustainable, replicatable results through grant making.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's definitely one of the things we're thinking about in the current situation, is how do we reduce the burden of being funded. Thank you, Monica. Mary.
Yes, hi. I was about to say good morning, but good afternoon. I'm Mary Kopp. I'm with the Hope and Heal Fund. We are a statewide funders collaborative focused on gun violence prevention in the state of California. And the last couple months have just provided a wonderful time with everything sort of slowing down to be able to join events like this and just continue our professional learning. So that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cindy?
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Downey from the James Irvine Foundation, and I am relatively new to the program officer position and just looking to learn more about the science and the art and science of grant making. And I'll have to ask your forgiveness in advance that I'm home with my baby, and so I'll be remaining off video and muted for the duration of this webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We welcome everybody to take care of themselves however they need to. So that's wonderful. Let's go to the one person who's, I don't know if you're on video and phone or phone, but the phone number ends 2566.
Good afternoon. My name is Nikki Reen, and I'm with the Rancho Santa Fe Women's Fund. And as of today, I am co-chair of the Grants Committee. And my co-chair Mara is also on this call, and I think we're just looking for insight and clarity in providing the appropriate organizations to our membership for funding.
Thanks so much. Let's go to Mara then.
Yes, as Nikki said, my name is Mara Buchholz, and I am also the co-chair for the Rancho Santa Fe Women's Fund. We're kind of a pooled collective giving organization, and we are just looking to kind of help streamline the process a little bit and make sure that what we give to membership to vote on to fund, we're putting our best foot forward.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. And I don't want to take too much more time. We have about 6 more people, so if we can just keep it brief, that would be great. Ollie?
Hi there, this is Ollie Ben from the Jewish Community Foundation. I'm the Director of Philanthropy and Social Impact. I'll keep it brief and say everyone else has already said approximately what I'm interested in.
Thanks so much. Mitchell? Mitchell? Nope, no sound. Well, I will tell you all, Mitchell is a star colleague of Sharon's at the Leach-Tag Foundation, and we're so glad he's here, along with his colleague, Jordan.
Is that like to call on me? Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon Daniels. I, too, work at the Leach-Tag Foundation with Sharon and Mitch. So happy to be here, and I do communications for grant making, so I'm really looking forward to learning more about the depth, sustainability, and equity within grant making.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, okay. Laura?
The whole nonprofit scene here in San Diego.
Megan, you're muted.
Thanks. We're coming in the home stretch. Kahila? Correct me if that was not right.
I know, yeah, you said it right, Kahila. Hi, I'm with San Diego Social Venture Partners, and I'm really new to the grant making process, so I'm really excited to learn from you all.
Thank you. All right, 3 more folks to say hello. Anne?
And I am with the Bill and Ginger Winder Family Foundation, which we are fairly new, and I'm always looking for more information on how to work smarter.
Great, thank you. Shiona?
Good afternoon. I'm Shiona Song with Women Give San Diego, and I'm looking forward to some of the gems of information that I'm sure Sharon will share with us today.
Great. And finally, Krista.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Krista Van Tassel, also with Women Give San Diego, and interested in learning how to apply these lessons to our own grant making process. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have just a really great wide variety of folks with us today. And we're just so grateful to Sharon Goodson, who's the Vice President of Philanthropy and Organizational Development at the Leach-Tag Foundation, which is a longtime member of San Diego Grantmakers. In fact, Sharon has been on our board of directors and a number of committees, and just a real leader in the field, certainly, and in I think this community of funders that we all become together. Her work optimizes the Leach-Tag Foundation's impact, enhances integration and effectiveness, and works with partnerships, initiatives, and grant making throughout the community. She's been there for, oh wow, you just passed your 10-year anniversary.
I did.
April 2010, congratulations. And previously held a number of positions in this community and back in Colorado. So Sharon, welcome, thank you, and please take it away.
Great, thanks everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy to get to spend with everybody. We're going to talk about nonprofit research, or as we often will toss around, due diligence or vetting processes. And it's a fun topic to have. I tend to approach it, or like to approach it, from a very positive point of view, where really when you're working with a grantee, coming at it as, you know, sort of the ultimate win-win situation. You know, how do we really position a grantee to be successful so it's a good match for the grant, the relationship is a good match for the grantee and a good match for your foundation. I think we already went through this, Megan did, which was great. So we're going to approach today really looking at some key areas. And, our time is limited, but that's fine. Sometimes, I think there's an old adage of like, I don't know, I'm gonna mess it up, but the time amount that you have takes up, or the task takes up the time amount available. So we're going to look at these topics sort of at a pretty much high level. There was an article that I know Carlos sent out. It's a very good one. There are a number of very good articles out there, but that one I liked very much because it really talks, it really mirrored, my own personal values when it comes to grant making. And this conversation will really follow the outline of that article. I will stop on regular points to ask for any questions and comments. Also have a few times for you to do a little reflection, during the time together. So that's kind of the way we'll go. We'll look at sort of what are the overall guiding questions that we bring to any grant making situation. What are we really trying to do here? And then talking about how we move that into creating a realistic strategy, the different areas that we have for due diligence. That means the different parts of an organization that we're looking at. How do we find the organization that we need? Red flags, what might not be right, and what do we do about those? And then any other, reflections and questions. I'll also say that, if you would like to speak again, I sort of tossed this out to Carlos when we were putting this together also, that we could always do, a part 2 to this or what have you. So if that's something that's of interest, we can absolutely pursue that. So when you are, when you're starting, you have a grant program, you need to fund something. What are you kind of looking at? And I think what I might do is, since COVID-19 is so fresh in everybody's minds, as I was even kind of putting this together, I really kept thinking about how due diligence has informed a lot of the grant making that the Leech Tag Foundation is doing now, particularly with a couple of the collaborative funding groups that we're a part of, and also the work that we're doing on our own. So I think I'll draw that also because it's kind of a uniform experience that we all have. And I know, you may work for foundations that have different, goals and programs and that kind of thing. So we'll try to make this sort of as general as we can so it really matches. But more than anything, the first thing you want to see is, does the nonprofit have a mission and goals that align with what you're trying to do, right? I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but it's the place to start. Who is sort of like-minded, who is really working along the same efforts. A lot of it, as you all may know, really starts with, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? For whatever that is, whatever if you're coming from food insecurity, this, addressing those in need because of COVID-19, the arts education, any of that, what are you trying to do? And it's kind of like, working yourself, starting with what is the problem, and then how are you going to work yourself back into the solution? And that's often how we approach it. And so if your problem, and I'll use the COVID-19, if the problem, which is what we're working on with a couple of our funds, is to help people who are in immediate need in having their basic human needs met. That means they don't have enough food, they don't have enough money for the things they need to get, like medicine or to pay their rent. They are having, immediate case management or, counseling, domestic violence issues. What are the organizations that can best help meet those immediate needs? And I won't get into a whole conversation about disaster grant making because that's a whole piece, but just to kind of put that out there, because there are, especially as, we look at this case of COVID, that often when you are looking at disaster grant making, the first thing that you are looking at is, what has to happen right now. And, we're really kind of seeing that very much in these last 2.5 months of going through this together, as we start to look at organizations who are looking to open up in some way, or are they're looking to see, can they bring not only their staff back to the workplace, or can they bring clients or members or students or whatever. That's what we would look at, sort of like the mezzanine or the next intermediate stage when it comes to approaching a disaster. Like you get into, you've taken care of your immediate issues, and then you're moving forward. And then of course there's the long term. So I only mention that because to that first questions point, you're looking at who are the right partners right now. And it could change. So just to kind of keep that in mind, you want to know, can they do the work that you need to have done to solve this problem? Can they feed the number of people? Do they, that capacity word comes up all the time. Can we work well together? I hate to say it, there are some organizations that they do good work, but maybe the personalities of those who you might be working with might not match personalities with your team. If it's something that you can work around, great. Often those are things that could be worked out. I don't know that I've ever really declined a grant because I didn't think I could work with somebody, but it's more that, you have to, it takes a different kind of effort just to make sure that, communication is going as it should, for instance, or you're being super clear if you don't have a relationship before. And that goes to that last question of, do you trust the organization? And I will say, I've given this so much thought over these last couple months because we've had to work so fast to get funds out to the people who need it, that a lot of what we've really relied on is this trust-based philanthropy. And I know that Grantmakers is doing a lot of work around that also. So keep an eye on the announcements that come out about different classes and conversations. I really think it's all about trust-based philanthropy. I think that the time just to start working on a particular grant and just the time to get to know nonprofits is not when you are actually ready to fund something. I think it's that something that you're doing all the time. And, to the point of, whenever around the work of your organization, if you are interested in a certain field, then even before you're calling the question for possible applications, you want to be meeting and building relationships with the organizations that you may work with or you may not work with. You want to, in another time, visit them. You want to have phone conversations. You want to build relationships with people in different parts of the organization. And I would say I'm relying on that so much more than what you get on a piece of paper. I just think your grant making, or one's grant making can be so much more positive, pleasant, and effective. So we'll talk more about that. And approaching this really with a realistic strategy. So I think the very important too to keep in mind is, there is a big power imbalance between you as a grantor and an organization looking for funding. And I can really go off on a soapbox for this one. And any of my poor colleagues who've heard me do that, I won't, I'll be careful, but I'm getting close. So it's just that, it's not, unless it is your money, but I think for most of us professional grant makers, this is not our money. We are in a place where we are fortunate enough to be able to do this kind of work. And we're essentially filling a role. I have seen way too many times when the grantor kind of takes on the persona as if it is their money and does it to an extent where it's just not nice. You want to, the whole building of this is building a very successful relationship that you hope will be long-standing. That your relationship is not going to just be for the tenure of a particular grant, but as I said before, it's going to start before, and you hope that it will go after. I have nonprofits that I've had granting relationships with for 10 years, 12 years, different projects. Maybe some were more successful than others, but those are many of the organizations that I've gone to right away to be able to work on during this crisis. And one of the reasons that those relationships were created to be successful is this next point, is really positioning a nonprofit for success. So something that we've done at Leach Tag for many years is not present a proposal to be approved by our board unless we ourselves were committed and that we thought this was going to be successful. So we've done a lot of what we call technical assistance. Finding the right partner to begin with, then working on draft proposals, really working out the outline of what the funding will be for, how issues might be developed, the budget often is something that needs some attention. So this is what I call about really positioning an organization for success and positioning myself for success. Because, I'm the one who, or you, whatever, would be the one to be able to, who's going to sort of have to manage that relationship. It's one thing to give the grant, but then monitoring the funding, it just doesn't stop with writing the check. You'll hear grantors talk about that a lot, that we do more than check writing. And I know hearing your organizations, I know that your organizations do a lot of that. You're also bringing people together for conversations and to help build their capacity in different ways. That all comes around with this positioning for success. And then the setting this realistic expectation. So, asking the organization for really the information that you need, and not asking an organization to jump through hoops and to write long proposals and to, send all sorts of information, which takes a lot of time, which is expensive to the organization in time, which takes the staff away from other things they could be doing, particularly your small organizations where you have a person who wears many hats. That it's a way that you're showing the organization too that you're kind of in there with them and that you're realistic. So for instance, with this COVID-19, I'll start with, in particular, the North County Fund that Leach Tag joined forces with the Coastal Community Foundation and the Rancho Santa Fe Foundation. So at this point, the fund has given 19 grants to basic organizations serving basic needs. And they, for the most, just about all of them, I will say all of them are known to at least one of our foundations. We've all worked with these organizations. And so we basically asked them for 5 questions by email. We did not ask for a formal proposal. We did not ask for all-out budgets. Because we knew them, we have a lot of trust in what they do. And we knew that nobody has time, and it would almost be absurd right now to ask an organization to put a lot of work into a proposal. And it's been really appreciated. So that's something to think about. Being very realistic too in terms of the amount of funding that you have. Being very clear in your communications that, if you have the ability to give a $10,000 grant, then you don't set it up where you would ask for, multi-years of information and planning, et cetera. I would almost always explain, the granting range that you might have available and be very transparent about those. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So moving on then, there are 4 key areas of focus. when you're doing your nonprofit due diligence. I put leadership at the top because I maintain this is the most important. Now that's Sharon's point of view, and but I really I think that, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but I really feel like if you have good leadership, you almost can get through anything. And so leadership, number one. Strategy and results. What does the organization do, and what kind of, what outcomes do they have? Their finances, the financial stability, we'll get into that piece, and their organization and operations. So how do they conduct their day-to-day work? So if you think about it, having just these four pieces, that it's not as sort of overwhelming as it may be. I think when I was first learning about this, I was kind of thinking, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of different elements, and really, if you can boil it down to these, it's pretty easy to look at. So first of all, what are we talking about? We're talking about leadership. So if y'all think for a minute, actually, I'll go through the slide and then I'm going to ask you to think about, or maybe as I go, think about the leader who, different leaders who may encompass this. So a visionary, and it doesn't have to be visionary like the big thinker, just somebody who sees the problems, the challenges that are happening, and is really always looking at how does their organization work to meet those challenges. So really sort of that connection, and you can say that about anything. In fact, often when I first would meet a nonprofit exec or any leader, I say the executive because it starts at the top. So whenever you can, I would really try to meet with the CEO. It's unusual that you wouldn't be able to, but I think so really getting a sense of, what's their work all about? How have they shared, what has their track record been? How do they kind of line up in their field of work? Have they been successful? Do they have an effective team? Who is on their team? How long have the people been on their team? What kind of a manager are they? Do people stick around for a while? Are they pretty happy at this organization? And the leadership of an organization is just incredibly, it's so key. Do they have a productive and engaged board? And your board, their leaders, the board are leaders of the organization as well. But we also know from our boards that they're not, or they shouldn't be, engaged in the day-to-day activities of our organization, aside from maybe signing checks or this or that. Excuse me, or the nonprofits organization. So it's amazing if you see, and I can think of a couple of executive directors that come to mind that do have very productive, positive relationships with their board. In fact, I'll even throw out some names because just give you some examples. So Don Wells at Just in Time for Foster Youth. I don't know if anybody knows Don. Fantastic in a million ways, but a fantastic leader. He's been with that organization, I think 10, 11 years. He started out as a volunteer. He looks at the issues that are affecting current foster youth and former foster youth, and his organization, he can take you through a story of what it means, what will happen with your dollars if you invest in that organization. He's got the track record, he's got the strong team. He brings his board along so that you get the sense they're right in there with him. And when you think about communication, I have not seen, I shouldn't say that, there are a number of excellent execs, but he is very consistent and excellent with the way he communicates both internally within the organization and externally. So you always know what you're going to get. So that's sort of an example there. Does anybody have anyone else might come to mind Anyone on the call? No? Okay. So there you go. And so I think it's really, building the relationship with the leader is the biggest piece. I think that's also where when things go awry, there's different issues, which they are, because in having a grant, taking a grant from beginning to end, there's always things that happen, and that's because we're human and we make mistakes and we're not perfect and we get tired, and so being able to be very forthright in the communication and solve problems together, also really important. Yeah.
Sharon, I really appreciate the point that you made, that I believe you were making, that you can't, it doesn't work if you don't have great leadership at the top.
Yes.
And everybody in an organization plays leadership in some respect or another. So it's really important to, as much as possible, get to know those folks, without interfering with their work, but really understand what they're seeing and what story they're telling related to the objectives you're trying to support.
Absolutely, yes. And that's a really good point. Thanks so much, Megan, that the person at the top doesn't take the place of the others in the organization at all. In fact, there have been times where I worked with an organization and was really disheartened, to see and learn that they weren't great managers and they didn't treat their staff particularly well. It was very bothersome, and that went into my decision of, was it the right partner for us? Yeah. So yes, absolutely. I think that, that's very important. And also to the point that you made, which is great, is that the visionary leader or whoever may not really be the person who knows all of the community needs inside and out. But that person should have the expertise and ability to get the right people in the role where they are able to do that. So.
Yeah, and we had Anne entered into the chat box, James Floros, who's over at the food bank, who clearly is demonstrating some extraordinary leadership right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. You see this James Floros, Vince Hall at Feeding San Diego, Greg Angel at Interfaith, John Van Cleef at Community Resource Center, Don Stump. I mean, I could go on. We are so lucky that we have these organizations. Yes, but absolutely, I think that's right. And they've pulled together teams that are extremely high functioning. So the next thing that the next sort of bucket that we're looking at is the strategies and results. And right now too, what I'm kind of looking at is I'm not really going through a funding application per se. I'm really kind of looking more big picture to the different pieces that help you develop your impressions and observations of an organization. But I would say that if you are developing a funding application, that you think about these different things and what are the most important questions you want to have answered by that. And I guess my other plug for having nonprofits do as little work as they really need to do. I think often we'll have things on applications like the history of the organization or I don't know, things that, are they really that important for right now? Like, do you really need them to go and do all of that work? Is it really fair? So maybe it's even, changing something like that to a checkoff box. Like, what are you really looking for with history? If you're really looking to say, okay, if an organization's been around at least 3 years, they have a track record, then just ask, when was the date of your founding, rather than have them go on a whole, have to write 3 paragraphs about their history. A little bit of a tangent, but there you go. So with these strategies and results, really that things are clear, that, really at the beginning, right in the middle of that, it kind of goes into, that clear definition of success that's supported by some data. So if you think back to the beginning of what problem are you trying to solve, of whatever that could be, and how will you know when you've solved it? That's often the way that that's often part of the, the conversation that I've had with nonprofits. Sometimes, I'm also not under the illusion that we're going to solve every problem. If I wish we could solve food insecurity, for example. I wish that we could solve homelessness. I know that the Funders Together for Homelessness is getting awfully close with a lot of their different things, but we are going to have people in need. Unfortunately, we are. So what is the definition? Is the definition that, I'll just be making things up, but, do they know what the definition of success is? Does the organization know what they're trying to achieve, and how do they know this? And so with the supported by data, and by data, it doesn't have to necessarily be very sophisticated or complicated metrics. I know that you gotta go crazy with this, and some organizations have more elaborate assessments than others. But how do we know that this organization is making a difference? It's like that when I talk about fundraising, like that's, so what? So if they didn't exist, what would happen? If we don't invest with them and they don't exist, what would happen? That's what we're kind of talking about. It is important that there's some sort of an evaluation process in place that is a little bit more than just counting the number of people who are getting a service, because then you're sort of continuing an issue. So what I mean by that is, say the program is around providing food, because that's so on my mind these days, that the food insecurity caused by the economic downturn with COVID has been like nothing I've seen before. And so what's happening with people with food? So immediately we're going to get them some food, and then we're going to see what other wraparound services can an organization have to provide that will look at, so they lost their job and that's why they don't have any money to buy food. Well, what could we be doing? Are they tapped into all of the social services that they need? Are they getting unemployment if they can qualify for it, or any other aid if they can qualify? If they can't qualify, maybe they're an immigrant and they don't have documentation, what can we do for them then? So when I'm looking at the possible success of a grantee and a possible relationship, I'm trying to go a little farther than just doing X, than just getting that done. We want to, we talk about self-sufficiency all the time. We want to, I had a boss who used to say, we want to put ourselves out of business, so essentially there won't be people who will need us. Well, we know that might not be very realistic, but how do we get to the place where less people might need us or the service, or less people will need the intensity of the service? So maybe they still need food, and they will, but now perhaps they're hooked up with other resources in the community and they're getting the other care. They're getting some mental health counseling. They're shored up in the short term.
Sharon, how do you balance the idea that absolutely, particularly with an example like seeking support in food security, there's a place where people are going to show up and in some way indicate that they could use a little bit of support. So we have this opportunity to provide more than that singular service, but it's not necessarily true that a food pantry or another organization is going to have expertise in this broad spectrum of needs. So are you saying that we think we should sort of consolidate all those things and organizations should become generalists, or is there another path to that?
No, I think it's more along the way of, do they have people that they could refer to? It's not we don't want to make it like a one-stop shop if it's not meant to be a one-stop shop. I think I've worked with a lot of the, I say like church basement food pantries through the food bank doing fundraising, and what they do is finite, and that's great. And, bless them for doing that. What I'd like to see is that they also have a list, just even a piece of paper that shows where people could get other services. That's all I mean. So that they're not, they're within a whole network of care.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. The financial stability, this is a big one. And this in and of itself could be its own workshop. But basically looking at these kinds of things that, you know, the people in place are experienced, they can track their progress, you know, are they forecasting, do they have a budget? Do they have a budget not only for the year for the operating expenses, but then do they have a program budget? Is it a big deal for them to do a budget? You know, sometimes, you know, I've talked to nonprofits, it's sort of like, can you do a budget for a particular program? And it's harder for some than others. So that it comes into a capacity issue. And I have had times where I've suggested training. I do it all the time for nonprofits coming from a place of just a way to be of help. Trainings that are not going to be not too expensive, et cetera. But, you know, do they have a fundraising strategy? You know, a plan? Are their financials clear? And do they set themselves up for, in the event of a disaster like the one that we're in now, essentially, do they have enough cash on hand to get them through X amount of time? And there are a number of different theories on how much an organization should have in reserves. That's kind of almost a personal issue. I have had nonprofits ask me, do we get dinged if we have cash on reserves and then it looks like we don't have the money, that kind of thing. But you're basically, from an investment point of view, you want to be investing in an organization that has its act together, that's not desperate, that has some time for planning, and that has the tools in place to keep it going. We've been talking a lot about an organization's operations already, but that, you know, I had said it's a positive place, you know, it has the good systems and HR. You know, I think one of the most effective things that you can do, I think I can do, is the site visit. And even if you are doing this virtually, or we have to do this virtually for a while, organizations have done some terrific jobs with virtual site visits. Interfaith had one that was dynamite. Coastal Roots Farm, up where we are, had one last week, which was terrific. Leadership are getting very creative about how they show those invested in the organization and prospective investors what they're doing and why. But you can really tell a lot. You know, it's kind of like anything. You know, you can kind of tell, what sense do you get when you walk into a place? You know, do people seem happy? Do they seem relaxed enough? You know, I mean, this is stressful work, but what is the sense that you have? So that's what that part is about. Finding the information. There's lots of places to get the information. Of course, a funding proposal will give you some, but I would go further than that. I would look at the organization's website, see what I could garner there. I love doing Google searches on organizations, especially if, you know, they're new to me and I can, you know, read a little bit about their history or some of their partners. You know, who have they worked with? You know, how has that gone? Referrals from other funders, top of the list. Grantmakers, amazing for that, like, amazing for many, many things, but the referrals from one, you know, funder to another, you know, sort of like a reference. We do it all the time. I mean, really, I think every week or two, especially during this COVID piece, I've had my colleagues from other foundations or giving circles or whatever reach out and ask if we know organizations. I will also often tell nonprofits that I work with that I'm happy to be a reference for them. So if they are introducing themselves to a new organization, can I help to make that easier? And that's also, somebody had mentioned the equity piece. You know, it is a way too of leveling the field that, you know, if you can get an if you can help get an introduction for another nonprofit, or you can help set the pathway, all the better. And you don't just sort of leave it to chance in a sense of like the same organizations getting the same funding. So I think that that's a big role of ours. I already talked about the site visits and for sure any published materials. So now some red flags. And this is basically, I know we don't have a ton of time, but we really don't have a ton of time, but what to do when you see things that aren't, that don't seem quite copacetic, as I would say. So, but I don't know if anybody, not of an organization, but if you have been in any situations where something didn't feel right to you, and maybe what you've done. If I have any takers.
While people are thinking, Sharon, yeah. Mitch raised the point that we're in a sort of different financial and economic situation right now. So do the same financial stability sort of metrics and considerations apply now, or how might you be thinking about those differently?
Right. No, that's a good point. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this is a very tricky time, and no, I have to say very honestly, I have not been looking very closely at the, really hardly at all, at reserves, at debt. I mean, in the two funds that we have, the North County Fund and the Jewish Fund, were really, well, the Jewish Fund we were doing loans. We did a bunch of no interest loans at first when organizations were getting ready. We're in the process of applying for the payroll protection program. And so we did ask for some financial information at that point, but that was really to gauge how much money they needed, how soon. It really wasn't to make an assessment of sort of how like good they are or how worthy of the funding. No, I mean, I'm personally very worried about some organizations that are will they be able to sustain this? We had organizations who were vulnerable going into this. Probably more in the Jewish community, because it came up very clearly that, as we were doing this, we saw, I mean, we have organizations that, they don't really have reserves. They don't, sometimes meeting a payroll is a real challenge. I'm saying none of these are real like deal breakers. I'm just saying that, and you decide too, because I have invested in organizations, I'm thinking of one now, a Jewish community organization, that the role that they fill in the community is so important. And they're so dear, and I trust them. They just maybe have not had some of the financial savvy for whatever reason over years. And I look at it differently, so really what I was kind of giving you with this whole piece was more all things being perfect and equal. That was the thing. I do have something that I created, and I've used it. I can also send it to Megan to send out with this, is like a rubric that I've created to help score nonprofits along lines, like on a 1 to 5 scale. I sort of like wince at saying it because I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, you're scoring them. It's like, are you turning what is a, work of the heart into an objective piece? But I have had donors who I've worked with where I've had to do that. I've had to quantify my recommendation, and I had to quantify it with a score. And so the thing that's helpful with that is that it does give you a basis, because there's also some reasons for the scoring. So I'll say that you all might kind of get it, find some interest in that too.
Yeah, that would be great. I know we just have a couple of moments, but I think Mary asked in the chat box a question that sort of gets to the heart of how I think I would sort of summarize our time together. So if you want to come off of mute, Mary, and just make that observation that you did.
Sure, yeah, I wrote it in the chat box, but it's just basically, I feel like the funder circle, in California, probably throughout the rest of the country, is just it's a little bit of a closed circle. Here I cannot. Oh, also come off video. Little bit of a closed circle, and I worry about some of the lesser known organizations out there doing great work in community, but number one, they don't have the resources to write grant applications. Number two, they don't have, leaders who can go out and meet with funders. So I'm just wondering how we get ourselves out of that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think we have to, we have to take ourselves out of that, out of our sort of, comfort zone. And that, I think, is also the piece of that the time to be doing this is not when you're trying to do the funding right away. We've done, now for a while with LeachTag, right now, we're not, because our grant making has shrunk so much, we're so much more of an operating foundation, but there was a time where we took unsolicited applications. Then we sort of moved to organizations applying upon, invitation. But way back when we were doing it, 10, 12 years ago, with everybody, I was out all the time. I loved it. I mean, I was like the constant site visit person. We did a lot of research. We were trying to get, who's doing what, where, and I think that's the ideal, Mary. I mean, I would really say that, and I hate to kind of cop out and say that, like, well, but you need time. I mean, unfortunately you do. Like, that's the only thing I'll sort of say to that. But really what we probably really need to do is make the time, especially if we want to focus, are on organizations that, especially if they don't have the capacity to write a proposal and they don't have the capacity to meet with funders. Then we also want to sort of revise what a lot of this was about, in this presentation. What do we want from them? If we really want them to be excellent at community engagement or advocacy for a particular group, or what have you. I'm kind of thinking of the organizations that could possibly fit, speaking up for those without a voice. Then then the expectations that we have for them are different, but we have to take the responsibility, because I kind of look at it too, like the responsibility, we've picked a problem that we want to help address. So the responsibility of how we're going to address that problem is on us as funders. It's kind of like, how do we find the best people to work? My colleague Charlene, when we started working in Israel 10 years ago, she spent, 2 months in Israel at a coffee shop, hour after hour, just meeting people. No funding decisions. We didn't even have a strategy set, but just to learn. And I think, we can do focus groups. We could do interviews. I could talk more about that.
Yeah. I want to sneak one more question in, Sharon, and then we'll wrap up so folks can move along.
Go on to your next
important one. Yeah,
yes.
Beam to the next. Anne raised the question that basically says, do these principles apply across the board no matter what size of grant you're making, what amount of funding you're working with, or is there a sweet spot for that?
Yeah, I think it's the same. So what I gave you here too, and I'm sorry that, I sort of went to that sort of lowest common denominator in what I selected here. And it's the lowest common denominator for denominators for what successful outcomes would likely be. But kind of to the point where I gave you the example of that one organization that doesn't have it all together, but they're fantastic program delivery people. Then no, I don't hold them accountable for all of that. I will say leadership is my priority. I will kind of own that. You will have other funders who may think differently. They might. I just have seen too many times that just really needing to work with a person, just really, or people, a team, and that it's never super clean. So I would say that if you don't good somebody there, it's going to be hard. But I think it's also, and you'll see maybe when I send you this rubric, it's for all of you as funders to kind of decide on your own rubric, on what your own priorities are. You sort of had to just all things being equal, these are the top.
Yeah, wonderful. So I know you offered to stick around a little bit if folks have a desire for more conversation, but for those who have to depart, do you want to offer some closing thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm happy to be a resource. You know, as I said before, so many of us are. Here's my email address. You're welcome to reach out anytime. If you're not fully taking advantage of Grantmakers, really do. You know, I can't speak highly enough of, you know, and really say how lucky we are here as funders. We rely on them an awful lot for bringing us together, not only for capacity building for ourselves like this, but connections to other funders and education. And, you know, they've got their pulse on what's happening in Sacramento and DC and research. Anyway, so, and if you're not a member yourself, to join, but I think I will stop there. So,
Yeah.
But anything.
Thank you. And thanks, Monica, for raising a point that I'll close on, which is we're all cognizant of the power and privilege that resides with us, which Sharon mentioned at the top, as stewards of funds to do good in the world, whether it's our own money or that's been entrusted to us. There's an inherent disconnect between the folks who really have the knowledge on the ground and are most deeply impacted by the things going on around us, especially brought to light today for those of us who generally can reside in a place of privilege. It's laid bare. It's very clear what's going on and who are most essential to this response. And so as we're moving forward in this work, always keeping that in mind, that privilege and honor that we have to be the stewards of these resources and to be in relationship, to be responsive and trusting of those who are the recipients of the fund. And Monica's point was, how do we get more of this technical assistance? How do we get more of this, the resources out into the community in the easiest way possible for the folks who need it? And thank you, Sharon, for recommending Grantmakers as a resource. I will point out that we have more of these fundamentals courses that are always available to you on our calendar. On June 11th, there will be a session called Addressing Implicit Bias in the Age of COVID-19, which will get more into this topic of how do we even undo the things that are in our head that we're not going to be able to do without, so we got to work around them. And with that, I just want to thank you all for your commitment to the craft, to learning and community, which is so important to building knowledge, and invite you to reach out to us anytime. We are here, we are your community, and we're honored to have you as a part of it. Thank you. Have a restful weekend, perhaps a long holiday weekend, however that looks these days. Stay well and stay in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody.